Good afternoon, everyone. This is Korean. Today I'm going live from Tiju's Academy, Tiruvalla branch. Hope all of you are doing good. So let's start today's session. So today I'm going to start off with the balance of what we did the last time and the one before that. So some final tips in speaking, IELTS speaking. So if you remember, last time I spoke about the criterias and before that the format. So let's see what are we going to do today. So now that you're familiar with the format and assessment criteria, let us look at some important tips while preparing for the IELTS test. So the last time I spoke about the criteria in my last video, and before that I spoke about the format. So if you all know, if you all remember, it's easy. The format of speaking is, there are 3 parts. Altogether it's a session that goes for 15 to 20 minutes. And in the first part, part 1 is all about your warm-up, personal questions, and then it goes to around 4 or 5 minutes maximum, and maybe your intro questions, your name, where you come from, what you do, and your hobbies, and what you do and what you don't do, your likes and your dislikes. So ellam parnal, it's all about personal questions that will be asked to you in your part 1, that is your warm-up session. And then you move over to your part 2, that would be your cue card or your task card session. Avade you will be given a cue card and a task card, or a task card or a question കാണും. You'll be given a question and there will be some prompts below it, and then you need to prepare that question, that whole question in 1 minute and 60 seconds, and then speak on it for 2 minutes. Adana part 2, that's your cue or your task card session. And the part 3 would be your follow-up, that is related to your cue card or your task card. You will be asked some questions. In general, you need to answer those questions. So part 1 is the warm-up session, part 2 is your cue card or your task card, and your part 3 is your follow-up sessions. So altogether it's 15 to 20 minutes is the time, the format of the speaking exam. That was, I spoke about it, or I spoke about that the live before this. And then you have the assessment criteria. If you all know, there are 4 criteria that you're assessed on or based on. That is, your speaking is based on your vocabulary, your pronunciation, your grammatical range and accuracy. So these are the things that they will be looking for, the criteria, and I spoke about how each criteria can be performed better. So today let's see how we can look into some of the tips while preparing for your IELTS exam. So this will be the last or the concluding part of the 3 sessions that I did before. So let's start from the beginning of how we can ace or we can do better, or your tips for your examination. So using band descriptors. So if you all know, band descriptor nokitanu, you are assessed by your examiner, your scores, that is from your 0 to 9. So for example, if your agents, or if you know that a university or a college, or if you're going for work, whatever, they'll ask you that you need a band score, right? A band score so 7, 6, 5, 4, it goes all the way from 0 to 9. So band descriptor namuku, you can download the public version of the band descriptors. Keep these in easy range to read carefully and several times. All you need to do is IELTS in the website power. There's an option where you can download the public version of the band descriptors. Not only for speaking, you can download the band descriptors for your writing task 1 also and your task 2. This is easy to download from the IELTS website. And you should keep this ready with you. So what can you do here? You can highlight key criteria that helps you get a higher band score for each assessment criteria. Ella assessments assessment what criteria you need to focus on. So when you're practicing, make sure you have this band descriptor with you, right? And see where you are lacking. Is it your vocabulary? Is it your pronunciation? Is it your grammar? Is it your fluency? 4 criteria aanallo. And the band descriptor clearly states what you did and what you did not. So try to look into it whenever you're practicing. Record and assess your performance against each criteria of the band descriptor. So, 4 criteria on you know that now by now. You can download it, and while you record yourself and when you assess, look at the band descriptor notator. You can assess yourself where you are standing or what your scores are, and you need to ace that. You need to perform better, and when you read the higher band, you'll come to know what you need to do. That's going to help you that way. Adu nangala angane help you, right? Your scores may vary for each assessment criteria. Yes. So it's not that each time you do you record and you check, you'll be getting the same scores on all the 4 criterias. It's possible that you may be doing good in your pronunciation and your vocabulary, but maybe you're lacking in your grammar or your fluency. So എല്ലാ 4 criteria ഒരുപോലെ ഒരു സ്കോറിലല്ലായിരിക്കും നിങ്ങൾക്ക് പോകുന്നത്. So it depends how you do. So for example, if your fluency is good, it's not that you're reading your other criteria like your vocabulary, your pronunciation and grammar is also going to be good. So make sure when you're practicing, each of these criteria are assessed together. So last namakku tip noka, to target a particular band score, make sure you fulfill all the features of that band. If you display even one feature of a lower band score, consider yourself at that band and target to overcome or rise above that. So when you're practicing ഒരു band score ആണെന്ന് നോക്കി, make sure you fulfill all the features of that band score. അതിലേതൊക്കെയാണ് കാണിക്കുന്നത്? So for band 9 fluency, for band 9 what is for grammatical range and accuracy, vocabulary എന്തായിരിക്കും, pronunciation എങ്ങനെയായിരിക്കും. So if you display even one feature of a lower band score, you have to be considered, you consider yourself at that band, the lower band, and you should target or try to achieve and to rise above that for a higher band score. So this is how you can help yourself. So using a band descriptor, and as I mentioned before, all you need to do is just log into your IELTS, or you can just log into the IELTS website and download the band descriptors. Not only the speaking band descriptors, you can also download your writing task 1, task 2 band descriptors. They are all available. Then it's free. It's not charged. Okay, so now let's move over to the next slide and see what do we have here. The first was, this was the using your band descriptors. So second one, tips to follow while practicing. What are some tips while you're practicing for your IELTS examination? The first tip, begin with rehearsing each part independently and gradually progress towards practicing the entire test in one go. Very true. For example, as I mentioned before, part 1 under, part 2 under, part 3 under. We have part 1, that's your warm-up. Part 2 is your cue card, and part 3 is your follow-up. That's what we do here as well in Tiju's Academy. This Tiruvalla Tiju's Academy. That's what we do. When a new student or a new candidate comes in, after the orientation, after the introduction of all the 4 modules, when it comes to the speaking part, we don't start with part 1, part 2, part 3 on the first day. So usually what we do is we start slowly. We begin with part 1 first. That is your warm-up questions. Adhyam nammal start cheyana. So he or the candidate, he or she gets accustomed to types of question that comes along in part 1, and slowly and gradually we move over to part 2, your cue cards or your task cards, and then we start asking them the follow-up questions, your part 3. So make sure when you start, when you begins in the initial stages, start with one part at a time and then go to the second and then third, and after that take it as an entire test, 15 minutes, assess yourself with your cue cards or your follow warm-up questions, cue card and your task card. Okay, that was the first tip. What's the second tip? Time yourself for each part and the full test. Very true. You have to make sure that you adhere to the time. So it's, as you know, 4 to 5 minutes is for part 1, 3 minutes is for your cue card or your task card, 1 minute to prepare and 2 minutes to speak. So make sure you follow that time, and then the remaining whatever the follow-up questions are there, try to answer that also in that 15 to 20 minute time frame that you have. So you need to time yourself, because that's very important. If you don't time yourself, it will be very difficult for you to manage in your examination time, because time management is very important. As I mentioned before, warm up when it's a part 1, don't give very big answers or long answers. Make sure it's 2 to 3 sentences, short answers, that's more than enough. The long answers comes up in only in your follow-up session, last delay. And very true, in your time management, the most important time management would be your cue card or your task card, where you have to prepare your cue card in 1 minute, that's 60 seconds. So keep practicing that at home or wherever you go. Try to practice your cue card or make your cue card in 60 seconds and speak for 2 minutes. And if a little more, better, 2 minutes 25 seconds, that's very good. Because when you go for your examination, you'll be really prepared. You won't be nervous or anxious, because if the examiner is not stopping you, you are ready to speak at length. Okay, now let's look into the third tip. Recollect and adhere to the format and duration of each part. So make sure you know how the parts work. You have to adhere to the format and the duration of each part. So as I mentioned, 4 to 5 minutes part 1, 3 minutes is for your part 2, and the remaining time will be for your part 3. So your chunk or the bulk of the time will be spent in your part 3, that is your follow-up sessions. That's where the examiner is going to ask you a lot of questions, and why he may or she may interrupt you in between and ask you to give you more examples or to extend your ideas. So make sure you adhere to the format and the duration of each part. Now the fourth tip. What's the fourth tip? Record and evaluate your performance to notice progress and focus on areas that still impact your scores. So when you're recording and when you're evaluating your performance, see how you're progressing. Is your band scores increasing or not? If not, focus on the areas that still impact your scores. So for example, you're good at fluency. Your fluency is good, right? Your pronunciation is also good. Let's take it as your fluency and your pronunciation good. But when it comes to your pronunciation and your vocabulary, you're not doing good. So when you're recording or when a friend or someone is assessing you, they can let you know, you can judge yourself where you're lacking, because you have the band descriptor with you, and see where you're lacking. And then try to improve on the other areas where your scores are going low. That's how you can get a better score in your IELTS examination. Okay, now let's look into the last tip here. It says practice with a friend, another friend, colleague, appearing for the test, exchange feedbacks and useful tips. That's very good. Here itself in Tiju's Academy here in Tiruvalla, what we do is we make a couple of students sit together, and the instructor or the trainer sits with them, and then what happens is each of them is given a question, different question, and that's how the ideas exchange. For example, candidate A is given one question, candidate B is given a different question, and candidate C is given a different questions. So 3 candidates are given 3 different questions, and the trainer sits with these candidates, and then when they start speaking, each individual candidate starts speaking, the other candidates also gets an idea of how to perform and how to speak on that topic or that question that's been put forward. So always make sure when you are practicing with your friend or your colleague, exchange feedbacks and useful tips, because when you practice with your friend or with your colleagues, what happens is your vocabulary or your pronunciation may be weak. At the same time, your friend or your colleague's vocabulary and pronunciation will be really good, right? So you can learn something from him, and at the same time, he or she can learn something that is good from you. So make sure when you practice, always exchange feedbacks and tips, so that you will be able to overcome the fears or the ella criteria nalla bole perform cheyambatu, and then you'll get good scores in your final IELTS examination speaking. So these were the tips for your practicing. When you practice, tips to follow while practicing. So first, as I mentioned, begin with rehearsing each part independently and gradually progress towards practicing the entire test in one go. Second is time yourself for each part and the full test. The third one is recollect and adhere to the format and duration of each part. Fourth is record and evaluate your performance to notice progress and focus on areas that still impact your scores. And the last one was practice with your friend or your colleague, appearing for the test, exchange feedbacks and ideas and useful tips. So these were for practicing. Now let's move over to the last slide and see what the last slide or the tip for the test, day of the test. പരീക്ഷയ്ക്ക് പോകുന്ന സമയത്ത് the day when you go for your test, what should you all do or how you should be ready for it. So make sure before you go to the test, sleep well the night before and reach the venue at least half an hour before the reporting time. So if you have an examination tomorrow at 9, make sure you reach there at least by 8:15 or 8:30, half an hour or before that, so that you will be there on time. Sleep well, take rest, be ready for the examination. Second tip endana, stay calm and speak like a conversation with a stranger. So idinte munpu njan paranjittundu, if you are nervous and anxious, the fluency will be not good. You will not be fluent enough. You will be searching for words. So make yourself comfortable. And making yourself comfortable, the best is the warm-up session, where you know the questions will be very easy, and all those questions that will be asked to you in the warm-up session will be yes and a no, your likes and your dislikes, what you do, your hobbies, are you working, are you studying, idellam namakku ellarkum, it's all personal questions. So that's the time where you can really perform. Ha samayathe 2 to 3 sentences alla, we just need to say 2 or 3 sentences, that's more than enough. 2 to 3 sentences and that's done. So that's the time when you can really get comfortable. So when you get inside the examination room, stay calm, try to overcome your anxiousness, right? Speak like a conversation with a stranger, right? Because you're not aware who the examiner is, you have never met him or her, and it's your first time meeting him or her. So be happy, try to calm down, start off with a warm-up in a very good positive way. So once your warm-up session positive item over, the remaining 2 will also go in a good direction. Your cue card session as well as your follow-up session. Okay, so now let's see what's the third tip. Do not give one word or a sentence answers. Expand on your points sufficiently to show you can speak at length. Very true. Even when it comes to your cue card, your warm-up, make sure 2 to 3 sentences, vanam. Just if the examiner is asking you, do you like tea or coffee? Just don't say tea, try to expand it. I prefer tea over coffee because I've been born and brought up, raised with tea, and every day morning when I get up, I always start my day with a cup of tea. So that's 3 or 4 sentences avade avumbo, that's enough. But never give a yes or a no answer. Make sure you're ready to extend your answers. And when it comes to your follow-up, you have to give a minimum of 4 plus or 5 sentence answers kodukanam. You have to make sure that you are practicing that. Warm-up is not a challenge. Warm-up is not at all a challenge because those questions are really easy questions. But when it comes to the follow-up, it's a challenge where you have to answer in general item answer India. So make sure in your practice sessions at home or with your colleague or your friend or whichever institutes or academies that you go to, try to expand your answers in your follow-up. That is where the examiner is going to stop you and ask you lots of whys and lots of ideas and opinions. So make sure you know how to expand your answers in your part 3. And in part 1, never give a yes or a no answer. Make sure you, along with your yes, say why or why you don't like or what you don't like to do, yes or no, and why. That is how you should go with your part 1. And in your part 3, make sure you expand it maximum, at least 4 or 5 sentences. Try to give an idea or an opinion that would be really great, or an example that will be really great, and you'll get a good score. Now let's look into the next tip. Expand your answers by giving reasons for every idea or argument. Example, if the question is, which season do you like the most? ഏത് സീസണാണ് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഏറ്റവും ഇഷ്ടം? So the answer is, state the season. Which season? Is it winter, summer, monsoon, spring, fall? Give reasons for your preference. Why you like winter, right? It's cold, you feel really fresh, you don't sweat a lot, the weather is really good. And talk about any memory linked to it, etc. So if you have any memory, so when I was a child, I went with my family to Munnar, or last year when I went to Munnar, it was really cold and chilly and I enjoyed myself. So that's how you link it and go ahead. And then your last tip here. What does it say? If you are unsure or haven't understood, paraphrase the question or ask the examiner to repeat it. As I mentioned before, if you haven't understood a question, you can always have the option to ask the examiner to repeat it, but make sure you don't ask it every time. Ella prasham choicha, it's not going to work out. Maybe once or twice in the whole session. The whole session that you have there, ഒരു പ്രാവശ്യം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ രണ്ട് പ്രാവശ്യം, not more than that. You cannot ask the examiner to repeat the questions all the time. So it can be once or twice, but make sure when you ask the examiner, it should be in a very polite way. Always make sure you use the word, I'm sorry, I couldn't understand that question, could you please repeat it for me once again, please. Right? Be polite and ask the examiner about that, but make sure it's just once or twice in the whole session, not on all questions. And finally, the last thing to remember, so make sure IELTS is not the test of your knowledge but of your language. So there is no right and wrong. It's all about how fluently, how good you speak this language, English. Therefore, focus more on constructing sentences in a range of structures, using a variety of vocabulary and displaying various features of pronunciation. That's all that is the examiner looking for. He's or she, the examiner, is not looking whether any question asked you, you're answering that question the right way. They're looking into your language, the language that is English, how well you can speak English, right? How well you form sentences, right? How well is your sentence structuring? How good is your vocabulary, your grammar, and your pronunciation? These are the things that the examiners are looking for, not the knowledge of the question. So make sure you all practice well, and I'm going to see you next time. This is Mon Kurian signing off from Tiju Academy, Tiruvalla. Take care. See you all next time. Goodbye.